Hello everyone, welcome back to another Project Gladiator weather forecast. Today I'll be covering the weather for April 13th of 2024. Currently, we have a marginal threat for Central Oregon into Northern California here. Risks for today do include a 2% tornado risk for the marginal threat area, a 5% wind risk for the marginal threat area, as well as a 5% hail risk for the marginal threat area. So we do have an all hazards risk, but all the risks are going to be at their marginal level. So we could see the potential for an isolated weak tornado or two, the potential for some isolated damaging wind gusts, the potential for some isolated large hail. For tomorrow, we do have a slight risk for Pennsylvania into eastern Ohio, with risks that do include a 2% tornado risk for the affected region, a 15% wind risk where we could see the potential for some scattered damaging wind gusts for the slight risk area. That's going to be the primary risk for the slight risk region, as well as a 5% hail risk where we could see the potential for some isolated large hail. Then for day 3 outlook, we do have a enhanced risk for southern Kansas into central western Oklahoma and northwestern Texas there. And this does have a probabilistic combined 30% with the potential of some significant severe thunderstorms for that hatched area. You may be able to hear my cat at some point throughout this forecast, so don't mind that. And then for day 4 to day 8 outlook, we do have a 15% for the Midwest across the Mississippi River down into the Arklatex region, including western Oklahoma, northern Texas, northeastern Texas, and Arkansas, as well as the majority of Missouri, the majority of Illinois, Iowa, and southern Wisconsin, where we could be watching for the potential of some significant severe thunderstorms upcoming. Taking a look at the WPC outlook, starting off with their excessive rainfall forecast. For today, we do have a dual marginal threat area, one for the Valley region in central California there, as well as a marginal threat that does extend along the coast of just to the north of the Los Angeles metro region into the south of the San Francisco metro region, where we could be watching for the potential for some isolated flash flooding. For tomorrow, we do have a marginal threat for the Los Angeles metro region, or maybe to the north of the Los Angeles metro region. I'm honestly not too sure where the Los Angeles metro region is, but I'm pretty sure it's right in that area. So it may just be a little bit to the north, but we could see the potential for some isolated flash flooding for the northern half of the Los Angeles metro region, and in a couple miles to the north along the coast there. Then for our day 3 outlook, we do have a pretty large marginal threat area that does span across the majority of the Central Plains, including South Dakota, southern North Dakota, Minnesota, western Iowa, far western Missouri, central Kansas, western into central Oklahoma, and northern Texas, as well as western Nebraska there, where we could be watching for the potential of some isolated flash flooding. For our winter weather outlooks for today, we are looking for the potential of some heavy snowfall for some of the more elevated regions in northern and western California there, as well as the potential for some heavy snowfall just to the south of the Hudson Bay region. And then for our day 2 outlook, we are going to continue to see the risk for some heavy snowfall for some of the elevated regions of California and northern Nevada there, as well as for our day 3 outlook, where we could be seeing the potential for some heavy snowfall for some elevated regions of the Rockies, as well as elevated regions of central and northern Utah, as well as some portions of the mountain range that spans in the Washington region to the to the east of Seattle there in the elevated portions. Taking a look at our weather model, starting off their 500 millibars in our surface observations and how those are going to work in conjunction to trigger and support the risk for severe thunderstorms. As of right now, we do have an upper level low that is currently off the coast of California here, with a little bit of a short wave that may be pushing to the south here. And that is supporting a cold front that is currently perpendicular to the coastline, and that does also turn into an occluded front that does circle up along the eastern and northern side of that upper level low here. This upper level low does have a surface low right underneath it, but this should push off into the east and the northeast over the next couple of hours, and that's going to support the potential of another low pressure system, another surface low that may fire off along the northern Nevada, southern Oregon region. That is going to be a combination of a warm front that's going to push off to the north here, across southern Idaho and southeastern Oregon, as well as a occluded front that is going to run to the south here. And Those are going to work in conjunction to support the risk and trigger the risk for severe thunderstorms across this region. We could see a cluster of storms that may fire off along either the warm front or the occluded front. And then as far as our upper level trough here, we are seeing some pretty strong mid-level flow with a flow upwards of 50 to 60 miles per hour at 500 millibars, which is definitely going to be able to support the risk for quite a lot of decent speed shear across this region and support the risk for severe thunderstorms as well. Taking a look at our 850 millibar winds as well as our low-level jet and how that's going to support the risk for tornadoes across this region, we are not really seeing all that much of a low-level jet to begin with. We may see very minimal 850 millibar flow just above the surface here that may lead to some very low end directional shear across this area. We do have a little bit of better flow up at 700 millibars with our low level jet, with 700 millibar flow in our low level jet that may be able to get upwards of 30 to 20 miles per hour, which is going to be overall very, very weak and support some very low end directional shear across this region, but may just be enough to support a very low end risk for tornadoes. Taking a look at our 200 millibars and how that's going to support our speed shear, as well as how our defluence is going to support our risk for severe thunderstorms across this region. Across the marginal threat area, we are going to see some spreading of the wind vectors here that may support a little bit of a void in the atmosphere and may definitely encourage a widespread lift across this region. And that's going to be a very large aid in the risk for severe thunderstorms across Oregon today. And then as far as our speed shear, we do see some pretty moderate 200 millibar flow, upwards of 60 to 70 knots, which is more similar to our 500 millibar flow across this region, which may support some very low end to some moderate speed shear and may be able to support a very low end risk for large hail. Taking a look at our storm relative velocity and how that's going to support the risk for tornadoes across this region, there was one thing that I did overlook in our low-level jet that I did figure out between making our 200 millibar segment and our storm relative velocity segment, is that I failed to realize that out of the west here, or out of the east here, we are expected to see a very modest low-level jet, very weak and very low-end low-level jet out of the west. Or sorry, out of the east here, but out of the south at our 200 millibars, we are expected to see some pretty decent 200 millibar flow out of the south here. That is going to lead to a much more exaggerated change in direction with height in our winds. So that's going to support some much greater storm relative velocity values across this region. So we could very well see a very large amount of storm relative velocity and directional shear that could definitely be very supportive of the potential of a brief tornado across this region. But if we don't have strong instability and we have some really strong storm relative velocity values, an updraft may not be strong enough to really support that much rotation until it's really ripped apart by shear. Taking a look at our bulk shear values and how that's going to support our risk for hail across this region, there is going to be much greater speed shear than I previously anticipated, actually, with bulk shear values that may be able to get upwards of the mid 50s to the upper 50s and the low 60s that are definitely going to be pretty supportive of the potential for hail across this region, but it will come down to how much instability we have. Taking a look at our composite reflectivity, we're going to be going over the timing for our storms as well as some general radar analysis. We are expected to see our storms likely begin developing across the marginal threat area around 5 to 6 p.m. EST. So I think subtract like 3 hours for this region. For Pacific time, that's going to be like 3 p.m., 2 to 3 p.m. for this region. And we are going to see a cluster of storms that may bring some, again, isolated large hail and the potential for tornadoes and some isolated damaging wind gusts. It's going to be a cluster of storms. We aren't really expected to see anything that's going to be isolated or widespread, but it is going to be a cluster of storms that we are going to be watching for. Taking a look at our dew points and how that's going to affect our instability across this region, we are expected to see some pretty low end moisture across this region. We are not expected to see anything crazy as far as moisture. We are expected to see dew point values are probably going to be ranging around anywhere from the low 40s into the upper 30s, which is going to be absolutely terrible for instability across this region. We will likely have to likely there's going to be a very low end chance that we're going to see anything above 1000 joules per kilogram today. Maybe not even get into the upper triple digits as a result of this low end moisture. Taking a look at our temperatures and how that's going to affect the risk for severe thunderstorms across this region, we are expected to see some pretty decent temperatures across this region. However, temperatures may be a little bit more on the lower end side of things because this is going to be in fairly mountainous terrain, which I probably should have mentioned earlier. But due to the mountainous terrain, we are likely going to see slightly lower temperatures. And the terrain is also going to be pretty difficult for storms to fire off in and support really all that much of a tornado risk. We could still see the potential for hail and damaging wind gusts, but our tornado risk is definitely going to be significantly more limited as a result of terrain, and we actually could see storms that may be able to fire off due to some orographic lifting alongside our warm front and our occluded front. But we are expected to see temperatures that are going to be somewhat decent, with temperatures that are going to be upwards of the mid 60s, which should support some decent instability if we had better moisture. But with our moisture, we are probably going to see Cape values are going to be much more limited as a result. Taking a look at our lapse rates and how that's going to affect our risk for severe thunderstorms as well as our instability across this region, we are expected to see a very large amount of lapse rates across this region. Even in the wake of storms, we are going to continue to see lapse rates that are going to grow. And when storms do fire, we may be able to see lapse rates that could potentially get upwards of 9 to the upper 8s and the mid 8s. That is definitely going to support quite a lot of instability across this region, and with our absolutely terrible moisture, our lapse rates are definitely needed to aid in the risk for severe thunderstorms across this region. If we can get a strong updraft going, which may be pretty hard to get with our terrible moisture, we could see the potential for hail as a result of these stronger lapse rates, and our lapse rates are definitely going to be able to aid in our risk for hail as well as our instability quite a lot. And again, as I mentioned previously, with our terrible moisture, our lapse rates are definitely needed for our instability. Taking a look at our instability and how that's going to fuel our risk for severe thunderstorms across this region. Again, as I previously mentioned, we're going to struggle to see any kind of strong instability, but our lapse rates are definitely going to be a really big help. We are going to see Cape values are probably going to be around the mid to upper triple digits. They're probably not going to reach anywhere near 900 joules per kilogram of instability, and they're most definitely not going to be able to get upwards of 1000 joules per kilogram of instability. So our lapse rates our instability is definitely going to be pretty limited, but should definitely be able to fuel the risk for some marginal severe thunderstorms. We may be able to get a strong updraft going with this, and that should be able to support the risk for hail across this region, as well as the potential for maybe 1 or 2 brief tornadoes across this region that are going to be weak, as well as the potential for some scattered damaging wind gusts. But overall, we are going to see a pretty limited risk for severe thunderstorms across this region. Taking a look at our surface-based cape, I don't really have a lot to say about this because the majority of our most unstable cape is expected to translate down to our surface cape, and that's going to allow for surface-based storms, the potential for tornadoes across this region. Taking a look at our 0 to 3 kilometer instability and how that's going to aid in the risk for severe thunderstorms across this region, we may be able to get a pool of some modest 0 to 3 kilometer instability across this region, which may be able to help with the risk for severe thunderstorms across this region amongst our very terrible moisture. And this is likely going to be as a result of our strong lapse rates. So our 0 to 3 kilometer instability could definitely be a pretty big aiding factor in the potential for some marginal severe thunderstorms across this region. Taking a look at our energy helicity index values and how that's going to support the risk for tornadoes across this region, we are going to see some pretty spotty energy helicity index values that may be able to get upwards of 1 to potentially approaching 2 in some regions, but our energy elasticity index values are going to be pretty spotty across this region, which is going to be in line with the 2% tornado risk, and again indicate the potential for 1 or 2 brief and weak tornadoes across this region. Taking a look at our wind gust models and how that's going to support the risk for damaging wind gusts across this region, a lot of our damaging wind gust models are very supportive of the potential of some low-end damaging wind gusts that could potentially reach upwards of 30 to 40 miles per hour. The risk for damaging wind gusts does look like it is going to be greatest towards midnight or around, I would say, 7 to 8 p.m. Across this region. With damaging wind gusts that may be able to get upwards of 50 to 40 miles per hour, and wind gusts that may be able to get up to 40 miles per hour across this region. That probably won't really be all that related with our severe thunderstorms, because our severe thunderstorms likely would have moved out of the region by the time our potential for damaging wind gusts increases. But later on in the afternoon, we could definitely see the potential for some damaging wind gusts that may be greater and overall more of a risk after our storms have moved out of this region. Taking a look at our meso-analysis page and our hail parameter models and how that's going to indicate the risk for isolated large hail across this region. Starting off with our large hail parameter, we do have a 4 and a 6 for that region. That does indicate the potential for some isolated large hail that may develop with some storms. And then for our significant hail parameter, we aren't expected to see the potential of significant hail whatsoever with our instability. So we currently don't have anything indicated from our significant hail parameter. But with our SARS severe conditional maximum hail size parameter, there's nothing indicated for that region. And then for our significant hail percentage, still nothing is indicated with that region. Overall, the majority of our parameters do indicate the potential of some isolated large hail, but overall the risk for large hail is going to be pretty limited. Now that I've told you the weather, please go down to the description and check out the socials for Project Gladiator and join the Discord for any updates on Project Gladiator. If you live in any of the areas that I covered for today, please stay weather alert for the time being. If you notice anything might have been wrong with this forecast or would like to make a suggestion or ask a question, please leave a comment. 3 other channels I highly suggest you check out are JaxonWX, Weather Watcher, and One Issued Weather. The links to their channels will be in the description, and hopefully I'll be able to see you guys tomorrow with another forecast.